All right, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining today's webinar with BeeHero. We have registrations from around the world for today's session. I'm very excited to have Jeffrey go through the presentation of this research today. I'm Maureen Bellatori. I'm the founder and CEO of Agency 29. We are a strategy and creative firm for food, beverage, and agriculture brands. I am very pleased to have Jeffrey Shaw here today. He is the Director of Field Research, Equipment Specialist, Beekeeper, and Grower Liaison for BeeHero. BeeHero maximizes crop yields through precision pollination, combining sophisticated machine learning algorithms with low-cost sensors to stimulate full output potential during peak pollination cycles. By tracking and optimizing pollination in real time, BeeHero ensures hyper-efficient pollinators that can increase crop yields by 30% on average. Based in California and operating globally, BeeHero manages the largest database of bees and pollination in the entire world. The company has been working with farmers and industry groups, including the largest association of almond growers in the world. But today we are here to talk about apples, specifically some apple pollination research from the Yakima Valley in Washington state. Jeffrey is going to talk us through that research today. I will be prompting Jeff with some questions throughout his presentation, and we invite all of you to use the Ask a Question feature here on the webinar platform. If you have any questions that come up throughout the presentation, and I can ask those of Jeffrey as we go through, we'll also save some time at the end of the discussion today for a live Q&A session as well. I think that's enough housekeeping. Jeff, I'm going to turn it over to you, and you can jump right into the goodies for today's talk. Thanks so much for being here.
Great. Yes. Thank you, Maureen, for setting this up, and welcome everybody for joining and participating in this. This is a particular passion, the Apple research of mine, and one of the many projects that I've participated in with BeeHero since I joined the company in about 2018. When we initiated the sensor deployment to a lot of the commercial beekeepers in the US for almonds and apples and cherries and various different pollination efforts. So we'll just kind of jump into a little bit of background on the company. Maureen did mention that we're founded in 2017. These are some of our key leadership positions in the company: Omer, Itai, and Yuval. Itai being the kind of the mastermind behind BeeHero. His family is the largest beekeeping operation in Israel, managing about 5,000 colonies there. And he really wanted to bring technology and AI to the beekeeping industry to really provide transparency to a lot of the growers and the beekeepers for their pollination efforts. Yuval is in charge of our chief technical officer, so all the infrastructure and framework around the infield sensing, the hive sensing, deployment to our growers, to provide platforms that the growers can look at the specific crops and get data from that and insight for their future decision making. Omer, the CEO, working with a lot of our investors, which are listed here on the bottom. And Zev recently came in as a Chief Marketing Sales Officer with decades of experience in the agricultural industry. Patel, our lead business and legal officer, who is originally from Israel. She will be moving to the United States to help us facilitate a lot more of the infrastructure with contracts with our many growers. And we all know Craig. He's our VP in business development, very instrumental in actually organizing this whole talk and presentation for you today. So just want to thank all of them for their amazing leadership and really taking the company to the next level as far as being the largest pollinator in the world. As we kind of dig into the actual research, we have conducted this research through a series of years. And the last 2 years is a lot of the compiled information that's in this presentation. So I've been had many trips into the Yakima Valley last year. And this year, we've kind of focused on 4 different geographic points within the area. It's about a 200-mile radius, or 150, and there were 4 different orchards that not only did we have deployed bees, honeybees, in a variety of different apples, from Cosmic Crisp to Granny Smith, Pink Ladies, Galas. The important feature in gathering this data was that we had very different microclimates in the valley. If you're familiar with the valley, there's a lot of orchards perched on top of ridges and down in the valleys. So they kind of have very different and unique weather patterns there. So it was very instrumental in us providing the growers with data based on their specific orchards and the entry of the bees, the actually different pollination times, and how weather affected not only the bloom, but also the bee activity within the various different orchards. A little bit about our technology. We have not only the in-hive sensors, which monitor the strength of the colony of the honeybees that are deployed within the orchards themselves, that tell the grower what is the strength. They are deploying these hives at different locations at different times based on the king blooms, and it's very important to them that they have right timing with the logistics. So the bees are coming in, they're leaving at specific points in time, as you're all aware, and the hive monitoring basically tells them that they're getting effective pollination from the strength of the colonies and the strength of the hives that they're actually purchasing for the pollination effort. Not only do we have the sensing capabilities in the hive, which are collecting data, but we also have in field. This year, we had over 1,000 sensors in the various apple varieties. And what that is giving us is the metrics of how many bees are in the orchard and what their flight times are, what their frequency is based on weather and conditions of the microclimates of the different orchards themselves. And all that data is collected and then analyzed for the grower on a platform which they can go in and they can basically look at the heat map of the orchard itself and the strength of the colonies and determine if there's zones or just the transition from like Pink Ladies to Cosmic Crisp. The Pink Ladies typically bloom in the Yakima Valley first, and then it kind of transitions to the Cosmic Crisp or the Galas, and you're actually able to, and we're able to provide the grower with the transition activity from one crop variety to another through their platform, and they can kind of see the heat map of the orchard and where the bees are actually pollinating. So they can better manage their spray schedules, their management schedules, their pruning, and their infrared crop technology, where they're basically looking at the crop yields prior to actually harvest. So this data is pretty much AI driven, and we've created algorithms for the various different types of pollinators. We have the giant Asian hornet, we have bumblebees, we have obviously the honeybees, hoverflies, and we're also developing some technology on leafcutter bees for specific seed crops. But this is all analyzed through a specifically sound frequency. So when the bees are in the orchards and they're recording or they're pollinating, we're recording the actual frequencies and the hertz of the wing activity and the buzz of them, and can isolate that and eliminate all the extracurricular noise to determine that we actually have identified the honeybee. And this has been fine-tuned to the point where the analysis is very accurate. And we are comparing that to the actual hive flights, so we can track the bees that are leaving the hive, the bees that are coming back to the hive on a minute-by-minute, hourly basis, and then look at the activity of how many bees left the hive and how many bees are actually in the orchard.
Jeff, before you continue, can I ask you a question about the big picture of this? Can you help everyone understand why you wanted to embark on this research in the first place? Was it to get more information about apple pollination in particular, or was it to explore this particular region? Like, help us understand why you went into this.
Particularly for the apple industry, we were really interested in looking at some key metrics on the thinning processes, because there's a lot of questions as to and expenses that go into these trellised orchards. They're dwarf rootstocks, so most of these orchards are trellised. They're not the old school apple trees like your grandpap had in the backyard, but they're more industrialized orchards, and they have a very rigorous schedule as far as managing those trees and also the actual yield per tree. So that has to be managed not only through the pollination effort, but also the thinning process. So those trees typically hold anywhere from 30 to 50 fruits, and beyond that, they don't want to stress the tree and they want the optimum fruit. So they really needed to fine tune the metrics as to the number of bees, the number of colonies, the actual pollination effectiveness in those varieties, and really dial it in so they can have information as to, do they have enough bees? Do they have too many bees? Are the bees entering the orchards at the appropriate time? When is the appropriate time through the pollination cycle that those bees need to be removed, and then they need to start the thinning process? So all the compiled information was providing bee data, pollination data, and ultimately key factors to help the grower to make better decisions, reduce costs, and increase yield.
Right. And so I would imagine that it would be incredibly valuable for apple growers of various varieties to have an understanding of when is optimal pollination for the various varieties. So is that information available to the industry in some ways? Maybe we'll get there in this report, or what is available to the greater community about some of your findings at large?
Well, the important thing is the technology is available. It's available to the growers now, and they can utilize that to make better decisions on their specific orchards and varieties in their regions. So what is available now is the technology. It is solid. It is working. We are providing value to the growers that we are working with now. So it's presentations like this to the industry that they can see the value and the benefit, and kind of a snapshot of what they're going to be able to obtain by utilizing this technology to better enhance their operations and reduce costs.
Great. Excellent. Thank you.
Sure, you're welcome. This is just a quick snapshot of one of the orchards and kind of the technology that we're deploying on the hives themselves. The bees come in, they're typically put in the aisles. You've probably all seen this. We have bee counters on the front of the hives, which are measuring the activity of the bees, the foragers leaving and returning to the hive. So we know on a daily basis what the volume of bees are that are actually in the orchard pollinating. We also have hive scales because a lot of these bees come in from various, mostly almonds. They leave almonds and go up into apples, and their specific weights based on the nectar and the pollen that they've gathered out of almonds. So sometimes with the logistics, the hives are immediately deployed out of almonds and straight into apples. So there's a kind of a period prior to the bloom in apples where the bees are kind of at a status state where they're operating on the resources of the hives themselves. If the bloom, like last year, was late because it was approximately 3 weeks late because of the weather, it was cool temperatures, the bees weren't foraging. It was kind of like a dead zone for them, and they were basically relying on the resources of the hive. And we can monitor that to see the health of the hives as the weights go down, as they're consuming nectar, as they're consuming pollen, and the queen is building up brood for the next pollination effort. We can track that within the colony for the grower and let them know basically what the strength is day by day. We have weather packs in each one of the orchards, multiple ones, which are giving us the weather, the wind, the precipitation, which affects their flight times and their forage activity. And we're also gathering pollen samples. So when the bloom is happening, and once it passes peak bloom, we see like alternative foraging starting to happen. So wildflowers, things that are blooming in the surrounding area, if that's more attractive to the bees, then they're going to kind of shift from the pollination in the apples to possibly alternative pollen. So we've analyzed that and kind of come up with the different actually resources that they're bringing back to the hive, and we can analyze that down to like what varieties they're actually pollinating, because each pollen sample has a signature. It's like a fingerprint on the pollen itself, and we look at that under the microscope. And I've analyzed the varieties by collecting the blooms off the trees and then taking the pollen off those blooms, determining what variety they are. I mean, we have them all marked, but are they Gala? Are they Cosmic Chris, Pink Lady? And then we analyze the pollen that the bees are bringing back, and we can see that this period of time on a 24-hour trap, it was all Pink Lady pollen. Then 3 or 4 days later, as the Cosmic Crisp went off, that we saw a shift that the bees are moving to the Cosmic Crisp because they're not only in the orchard and we're tracking that with heat maps of the sensors, but we're also analyzing what they're bringing back to the hive.
That's pretty remarkable that you can measure what is being pollinated. I also would love for you to elaborate. You mentioned that the bee data technology can measure the strength of the colonies. Could you elaborate on that a little bit?
Sure. As the largest pollinator in the world, we basically 1 in every 3 bites of food you take is pollinated by a honeybee. So bees are critical to the sustainability of modern agriculture. And with the various different pests and most of these bees are on the back of a truck going from pollination to pollination effort. So the health of the bees are very important, and their effectiveness in pollinating is very important. And the thrust of BeeHero is that we're monitoring those colonies for health and strength. So when they arrive at the grower's orchard, they basically know what they're purchasing. They know the frame the frame counts. Are they 8 frames? Are they 10 frames? Are they 14 frames? What kind of brood do they have? The brood is basically the developing bees. And those are eventually going to become foragers. So that's going to increase your pollination effort because you're going to have more foragers from those colonies. So the sensors specifically in the hive tell us the strength and health of that colony. And that's all distributed down through the beekeeper's platform, which is an app on their phone. So they not only know where their hives are, they know the strength of them, they know if they're the queen right. They know approximately the number of frames of bees and brood. And that's important to the beekeeper for transparency because the grower also knows that. So if they're bringing in strong hives and they're charged a premium price for those hives, then they're going to get paid for that. And the grower knows that they're getting effective pollination because they can also see the strength of those colonies. So it's eliminated like the guesswork of what I'm buying, what I'm getting for both the beekeeper and the grower themselves.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
As we move in, we talked a little bit about monitoring the hives and monitoring the bee activity. And this is an example of when the hives arrived and the loss of resources in those hives through approximately a 10-day period. So these are hive weights on the monitored colonies in apples in Washington. And you can see that the weight of those colonies prior to King Bloom, this was last year, the King Bloom didn't happen till late April. And again, it was a couple weeks late. So those colonies don't have anything to forage on, and they're using the resources in the colony. So we can monitor that for the grower. And this is important because you really want right timing for apples as far as logistics and bringing the bees in at the right time. There's pruning, there's management, and a lot of workers basically need to get the orchards ready, and sometimes the hives are in the way for a lot of that work, and they really want them delivered at the right appropriate moment. So monitoring temperature, monitoring the hives, and monitoring the deployment of those in the orchards is important. And plus just the strength. You don't want the hives continuing to deteriorate to the point where they're weak when the King Bloom goes off. And so you can see in this 10-day period, they're basically losing weight until the point where it starts to level off about the 25th. And that's when the bloom starts to happen. And then they're starting to bring in resources to the colony. And that's important information to the grower because they want to make sure that those hives are still at a standard level when that bloom takes off. This is an example of the in-field sensors. As I said, this year we had over 1,000 sensors in 3 different varieties in a grid matrix throughout the orchards, and we monitored the bloom during each cycle and for each variety. And so basically what I did is I would go around, and as the King Bloom came out, we had dates on that. As it moved and progressed towards full bloom, we had dates on that. And so we have a visual of actually the dates and what the progress or what the status is of the actual blooms in the orchard. So we can then compare that to the bee activity and the bee, not only in the hives, but also the orchard themselves. So we have visual data, and we also have the in-field sensing data and the hive data as well. So we're kind of comparing the full picture. The bees, the in-field experience, the number of blooms and blossoms that are pollinated, the resources that are being brought back to the hive, the actual analysis of the resources. So it's kind of like a complete picture for the grower. Then basically pictures to time track everything of where we were in the process. This is an example of the duration of forage flights. This top graph here, you can see the start and finish times. The finish times are the red, the start times are the greens. And if we go back to when the bees were deployed into the orchard, which was around April 10th, which is a pretty standard time, but it was a cool year, that flight time was pretty small because in the morning it's too cool, and by mid-afternoon it starts to chill down again, and you have to realize the bees basically aren't active until the temperatures are above 50 degrees. So as the weather starts to warm up And you can see right here, we have a significant weather pattern with this big dip in the finish time. That was probably precipitation, front moved through, and the temperatures chilled down, and the bees came back quickly on that particular day. And there was a very short window of forage time there. But as things start to move into spring and we start to get some bloom happening, you can see that these times significantly expand by a process of about 4 additional hours per day that they're getting forage and flight times. And you can also see here on the 21st, from the 20th up into the 27th, you're seeing a significant increase in the bee forage flight activity. So from beginning to end, 5 hours here, 10 hours here, that's an extra 5 hours of forage pollination flight time in the orchards per day. This is an example of the daily bee counts. So we're monitoring the bees leaving the colony into the orchard, foraging and pollinating. And when you look at the chart across time, you're seeing that the king bloom started about the 23rd, and then it started to really proliferate and up into the 28th, and you're seeing a significant increase in the daily bee counts leaving the hive because the weather has turned, the bloom has progressed, and they're basically onto the pollination effort. This is an example of the flight times in a chart that we provide to the grower. And again, these slides that I'm showing, these are all in a grower's platform. They can be viewed on a computer. They can be viewed on your smartphone device. Basically, each grower has a login user ID. They are segmented into various different orchards, various different varieties, so they can kind of massage and look at this data and make decisions based on this data for their operations team. And it's all basically driven directly to your smartphone. The beekeepers, same information. They can basically see what's going on in their hives. They might have dropped these off in Washington and they're back on the East Coast, and they're not going to be, they're 3,000 miles away from their colonies, but they can still see what the activity is and get real-time information. The first
And
chart.
Jeff,
Yes.
did you say that your sensors also measure weather data as well?
They do measure temperature and humidity in the hive and the ambient temperature. So they are able to see if you have a colony that is strong, the temperatures are consistent. If you have a weaker colony, maybe it's queenless, then you're going to get some pretty wild swings, and you get basically an alert on your app that like there's something potentially wrong. The colony is not queen right. It's basically crashing. And then you would go out and do some management principles on that. But most for the orchards and for these projects, we do have separate weather stations that we provide data to the grower on. And so this is information that's captured through our other sensors and transferred to the database and then straight onto the grower's platform. So they can see in the different orchards what the temperatures are, what the weather patterns are. In the hives themselves, they're tracked by GPS. So the beekeeper always knows where they're at, and they do have temperature sensors.
Got it. Great.
So we're seeing as that chart showed before, this is just a graph. It shows 5.4 hours of forage time up to 10.5 hours of forage time on these colonies. This chart on the right shows the bees per hour. So we're going from approximately 3,500 foragers up to 5,300 foragers per hour from each colony. And this is important because if you look at the density of the trees, the progression of the bloom, you want to know that the bee activity is kind of matching that progression. So as I mentioned before, you have data on the strength of those colonies, how much brood is in there, how much brood is emerging, how many foragers are being generated. And as the temperature warms up, there's more foragers. So you're seeing that increase in activity, not only in the hive, but also in the orchard. This is a chart that compares two different varieties and the daily bee counts in the orchard by the hour. And what we're seeing is the cosmic crisp were a little bit behind the pink lady. As I mentioned before, the pink ladies were the first into the king bloom phase, and then followed by the cosmic crisp. And we're able to gather this information from those 1,000 infield sensors in the bees pollinating the particular flowers. And that's put here on the chart. So we're seeing that the pink lady from the 9th to the 14th is increasing to the point where at April 14th, from the 12th to the 14th, it kind of flatlines, kind of levels out. So we're kind of into about a 75 to 80% bloom, and it's fairly consistent. And then you're seeing the cosmic crisp start to go off. King bloom happens. The blooms are 25, 30%. And you can see here from the 11th to the 14th, the significant increase in bee activity on that variety. So we're tracking the movements of, it's like workers in the field. It's like, okay, we'll go work this block. Okay, that block's done. Let's work this block today. Same way with the bees. The growers want to know, where are the bees? Like, what's the workers doing today? It's like, what are the bees doing today? So we can actually track that for them, and we can show them that they're transitioning from one variety to another variety. And that's important for the use of fungicides, pesticides, herbicides, applications, if they've got particular pests or things that they're trying to manage within the orchard. They can see that the movement of the bees is transitioning to the other varieties, and they can make key decision and strategy decisions to apply whatever they need to do or do the management practices that they need, because they're seeing that the bees are kind of moving to the next variety, and they've kind of peaked at the pink ladies.
I love that you keep drawing this back to the decisions that the grower is able to make based on the bee data, right? That's an important trajectory that happens, that the bee data is great, but it comes down to the actions that you're able to take at the farm based on the information that you're seeing. And so, like you mentioned, you can send the worker bees are going first, and then your actual workers might deploy into the field after that to apply their fungicides, pesticides, do the thinning, whatever it may be.
Yeah, you have to realize that, like, for years, these growers are kind of working on what we did in the past. It's like, well, we have this process, we do the same thing every year, it's consistent. And they have that dialed in very tight and very managed in critical decision-making strategies on that. But they've never known what the bees are doing. And they bring the hives in, well, that's just because we bring this amount in every year, and this is the amount we need. And they don't really know if that's accurate or not. Right. If that's the most strategic decision, because they've never been able to really track, what are the bees actually doing? It's like, we know the hives are there. We see them flying around a little bit. Right. What is the density? Where are they specifically in the blocks? And what are they going through? A lot of these orchards, they have cherries. Cherries go off first, and then they got multiple varieties of cherries, and then they got apples. And so it's very critical for them to know exactly what's happening. In the next slide, this is kind of where it all, the rubber meets the road, because in the critical decision making, for the apple growers, it's like they have various different pollinator trees. So they have Mount Everest, they have Snowdrift, they have Granny Smith, and these are the traditional varieties that help cross-pollinate the various different varieties of specific crop apples that they want. So every 21 trees, they have a pollinator. And those pollinators typically bloom first. So they're attracting the foragers to those traditional pollinator varieties, and the bees work those pretty significantly. And then they go off and they're working the specific crop variety. So they intermix these pollinator varieties in the specific blocks. And in this particular case, one of the growers wanted to know, hey, we're constantly replacing those pollinator varieties, but we're not really sure which ones the bees are most attracted to. And we'd like to know, because we want to plant more of the attractant variety versus the ones that are less attractive. So we did the infield sensing every 21 trees on those pollinator varieties of the Mount Everest, Granny Smith, and Snowdrift. And then we provided back them data throughout the course of the pollination effort, like which ones were the most attractive and how many bees did we get per hour on those 3 different pollinator varieties. So then they can make decisions in the future when they're buying stock. It's like, the Snowdrift is good, but it's not quite as good as the Mount Everest. Let's invest more money in the Mount Everest because we're going to get more activity and, more bang for our investment on specific varieties that we know the bees like and they're attracted to more so than others. Again, you mentioned like weather packs, monitoring the temperature, moderating the different microclimates of the different orchards. This is an example where we had some significant weather fronts that moved through the valley, and we're seeing kind of like a lot of activity, peak activity on the 13th and 14th, and then there was a significant drop in temperatures. And it lasted for about 3 or 4 days. And so the growers are kind of like, uh-oh, we're kind of in peak here. And now we got a weather front. And what is that doing to our effectiveness of the pollination? So we're able to share that information with them and say, well, on the 15th and 16th, you got a drop of about 35 to 40% in bee activity in the orchard during that weather event, which kind of limited the effectiveness of the pollination. Now, if you have rain, wind, different events that could wash the pollen off the open blooms, then once the weather starts to shift, you're getting less of your crop pollinated. So it's important for them to know, like, okay, it's windy today, and the bees, we're seeing like a 20% drop in the bee activity in the orchard for those days. And then we got precipitation, we got another 20% drop for 3 or 4 days. They're managing that window. It's like we're losing 4 days here where we're getting a significant drop in the activity, which is very important to them. And that's the quick overview. We wanted to leave about 10 minutes for some conversation and questions. So I appreciate your attentiveness and listening. And there's a lot more data. We open it up if you want to contact Craig or Maureen and set up a more specific in-depth dive into this information. But we kind of wanted to give you an overview of what we've done, what we're doing, and where we're going, and kind of open it up to questions and talk a little bit more about it.
Yeah, that sounds great. Thank you, Jeffrey, for taking everybody through this really interesting information. Like you said, if anybody wants to submit a question, you can use the Q&A feature here in the Zoom platform. We'll also send a follow-up after the fact if anybody wants to send questions after today. So summarizing kind of the whole big picture here, right? Of in short, what BeeHero does is it makes effective pollination possible, which can help support efficiency in the orchards by helping the growers make data-informed decisions. And so anytime we're able to bring technology into the field, the literal field, of agriculture, I think is an enormous asset. Always glad to see when that's happening. To you, who is, so in touch with the bees, what were some of your observations or surprises based on the outcome of this research to you? So surprising things to you from this research.
I think, for me, yeah, I really enjoy working with the bees and kind of seeing what their habits and approach is to various different crops, because it's a little different. I mean, it's very unique. And for apples specifically, it's a shorter window, and it can happen very quickly, or it can be prolonged slow. So you're kind of looking at the bees and how they're managing that most effectively through the resources that are available to them. And I think fascinating for me was really the pollen analysis and looking at in verifying. I mean, you kind of know the strength of the hives, what the grower is trying to achieve. You're watching the weather, and then the bees are in the orchard, and it's kind of like, okay, well, how much volume are they really hitting? And like, how many flowers are they really hitting based on these colonies that are in there? And I mean, just to give you a perspective, which was interesting to me, is we're tracking the amount of forages. Some of these colonies had over 1,200,000 forage trips in a 3-week period. So, and those could be like a 7 or 8 frame colony. And for a grower, it's kind of like, yeah, an 8 frame's pretty good, but it's not like a 14 frame, or a 12 frame. So an average 8 frame colony, you're getting 1 million pollination trips with one hive. Now, if you figure that each trip is approximately, I mean, conservatively, like 100 flower visits. I mean, but on average, you're looking at a bee's forage trip, they're hitting maybe 150 to 200 different blossoms per trip. And just looking at the volume on that, and we didn't have equipment on all 200 hives. We added the first year we added on about 50% of them. This year, they were more interested in the in-field technology for these orchards than the bee information, because we gave them a lot of bee information first year, and then they're like, we really want to focus on the in-field. And so we monitored less colonies. So in one orchard, we had 12 colonies that we had counters and monitors on. Over those 12 colonies, we had over 17 million forage trips in a 95-acre block. Now, if you figure you take that times 150 flower visits, you're at 3.2 billion pollination trips. And if you look at that, 3.2 billion, they hit 3.2 billion potential blossoms. But if you look at the crop yield, that's way in excess of the fruit yield that they'd want to get. That would be astronomical. So it's like, that's kind of why the growers are having to thin. And thinning is a major expense. It's it's very important. But if you look at the volume and the density of bees you have based on the density of the plantings of the orchards, you're pretty much over pollinating. And so you could reduce your costs by fewer colonies, reduce your expense by having to thin, and be more efficient. So
Right. And
for
that's
me,
what it's all about, especially in today's day and age where the farmers are constantly being squeezed, right? Do more with less, and so I love the focus of efficiency on this conversation. And to me, too, the component that you mentioned about the phased pollination was one of the things that was surprising to you. Does that happen in any other crops? Because I know that BeeHero is working with a number of different crops other than apples. We talked about almonds and you mentioned watermelon as well. Are there other crops that have specialized varieties that have different pollination cycles like apples do?
yeah, everything is unique and specific. It's like all the people on this call here, they're all different personalities. They're all wearing different clothes. They're all in a different environment. And it's kind of like, it's very diversified. And when you get into uh, agriculture, everything is different. Every crop is different. Every bloom
Right.
cycle is different. The precision, that's why we're like precision pollination. That's our tagline for
Hmm.
BeeHero. It's like you really need to be precise. You need to, like, if you and I are, like, we have this business relationship. It's like I need to know like what I'm going to provide you, and you're like, well, what can Jeff tell me about like what
Right.
BeeHero's doing? It's like, so we kind of get into a synergy, and that's pretty much what you have to do with the bees, the growers, the crop. And like I just deployed a watermelon field over the weekend where we're putting the infield sensing technology. Now, everything's different. Like watermelons, it's a seed crop, and the bio viability of those blooms are like 3 hours, 3 to 4 hours each morning. So the bees have to,
Hmm.
go to the males, and then they have to go to the female, and in order to effectively pollinate the fruit set.
Hmm.
And then the grower goes through every day and they tag the optimum ones
Hmm.
that pollinated, and they're starting that fruit set, and they remove all the blooms of the other ones
Right.
because they don't want the fruit to their selected fruit to lose vitality because
Right.
it's trying to develop other fruit sets. So they pull them all off, and then
Hmm.
over a period of 1 week, they go through and they tear all the male plants out because they don't want the bees to actually pollinate any more female flowers other than the ones they've already tagged. So
Hmm.
that's very, very meticulous, precise work in order to create seeds for a specific fruit crop. And so you really need to like dial in the information as far as when the bees are arriving, when the pollination effort is happening, and make sure that you've got the bees where they need to be on what they need to be at a specific point in time. And that's where we're really providing the key data, because the bees just arrive and it's like in the past, it's like, well, we think we're okay, and
Right.
but we're actually able to tell them in that field, like, yes, we have groupings. They even have density groupings. Like some of the field is planted at a higher density, and they're kind of testing
Hmm.
that out. Like, does it really matter that it's lower density? So we're like, we've got groupings of the sensors for the crop in higher densities and lower densities. So now we can compare and show them. We can say, well, look, in the higher density, it's, you're getting this result. In the lower density, you're getting this result. So then
Right.
they're getting those results and making executive decisions with regard to what's the best choice. And if you don't have that, like you haven't in the
Right.
past, you can't make strategic decisions that's
Right.
going to increase profitability, increase yield, and actually have you be a successful grower.
Yeah, exactly. So the question here, I'd love to see these data overlapped, perhaps with plant physiologists' collaboration on the effective pollination period of the key varieties that are being modeled?
Yes, we do have that information. The grower has that information, and that's what the grower is doing. So they're taking our models,
Mm-hmm.
and they're doing soil samples, the minerals in the soil. They're doing like the different varieties. What are the characteristics of those varieties? So there's like the whole team on the grower side that's analyzing their specific crop. And then what they're doing is they're taking our data, which we're providing on the growers platform, and they're merging it together to get the full picture of how it's integrating with their specific varieties, the biologists that are choosing those varieties, how they're cultivated,
Mm-hmm.
what their specific characteristics are for that fruit, like what they want, what's the ultimate fruit.
Right. But I think, Jeffrey, what this question is getting at is, yes, that information is available to that grower. Is it ever available to the industry?
From our perspective or from the grower's perspective?
Well, I guess either one.
It could be available to the industry. I think there's let's face it, everybody's a little competitive. And they seem to think they have the valuable information, the key information on that. And there is a lot of information that's shared at the conferences and things like that, what growers are doing. But when you're kind of getting down to the very specifics and people are contracting with BeeHero for specific research, a lot of that becomes proprietary. It's like, well,
Sure.
we really want to know specifically what's happening here. I mean, they've let us share a little bit about the different pollinator varieties, like I showed you in that one slide.
Yep.
So yeah, that information is available, but there is key strategic information that each grower has.
Sure.
That they're like, we want you to do this, but it's a non-disclosure contract.
Right. Right.
You can't tell anybody else about this because this is our little secret. So we do, kind of work with legal and what we can share and what we can't share in these type of presentations. But it is available. It is being modeled. It is being compared and cross-matched on those levels. And we have seen it. I have seen it. Well, it'd be nice to share, but some of that stuff is, that's the grower's choice.
Sure. Yep. Yep. I get that. What have you been working on as a whole, either on this project in general or your work overall at BeeHero, that you think would be useful, interesting, beneficial to share with today's Apple audience?
Well, that's a tough question. I think for me, what I am really passionate about is in this technology is that it's the point where it's super stable and deployable in any condition, because I've seen, like, from the beginning to a middle phase, even last year, and from last year to this year, the technology has, like, I would say it's increased about 100-fold from where the algorithms are to where the firmware is. And it's just getting better and better every day. It's like you're looking at technology and all the AI that's out there now that's proliferating. And our technology is scaling to at that same rate. And that's pretty phenomenal. And I'm very passionate about that because we are a startup company and we really want to scale this thing. We've already are the largest pollinator and the largest data set in the world. Okay. But it's kind of like, where do we go from there?
Right.
It's fine tuning it and making it applicable to everyone. And so that is of particular interest to mine because we have a lot of large growers that are kind of driving the technology and the need, but it's also beneficial for the small growers because we've deployed this technology in small farms like blueberry farms and raspberry farms and to the point where it's so stable and simplified that we can actually prep all the equipment, have the firmware ready to go. Everything is serialized as far as like the in-field sensors, and we can ship those to the client and they can self-install them. And it's
Wow.
and we basically give them, they share the field maps with us, where the rows are, what's the density of the rows, what they're trying to accomplish. Each project has a goal by the grower, and then we're able to basically send them their map with the key installation points, the equipment, and they can install it. Now, that's exciting to me because that makes it scalable and user friendly to not only like the large industrial growers, but also the small growers who want key insights and information. So it's it's available to for a wide variety of spectrum, and the ease of use is exciting to me because it's real-time data. It's like you can pick up your phone and you can see exactly what happened in a day.
Right.
It's like everybody is data driven. It's like they like want to know now,
Right.
like now, what's happening. And it's like that's why you go to the airport, everybody's sitting looking at their phone. They're not like talking to each other or anything. It's like,
Yeah.
see what's going on. So people are craving that information to make decisions.
Right.
And like, what should I do? What's everybody else doing? How are they doing it? And so the platform is really seamless in delivering to the beekeepers and the growers that data. It's just constantly feeding it up to them.
Yeah. It's really exciting.
And so yeah, it's exciting for you. That's exciting for me. That's
Yeah.
where I see
That's
it's
fantastic. And I
how do
love too that your point is it's exciting now already in terms of what BeeHero is currently doing, and it's only improving. So it's only going to continue to get more exciting, more impactful, more smarter in its ability to get that information to the grower for them to be able to make decisions.
yeah, I mean,
So
just to
yeah,
give you
final
one
thoughts.
one quick example, it's like we've streamlined it to the point where the technology, we were able to deploy a massive amount of sensors in a particular orchard for density and to gather the information. But it always was like, well, what's the cost of that? Are we doing that effectively? Well, we've upgraded the firmware to the point where it used to be for a collective set of 12 or 48 sensors, we needed a gateway to like capture that information
Sure.
from the sensors and send them to the cloud into the database so you get it on your phone. Now we can deploy hundreds and hundreds of sensors with one gateway. The gateways are kind of expensive because that's a communication point that transmits all the data. And if we can significantly reduce the cost of that equipment, but still gather the data, then it's more cost effective.
Right. Yeah. And you're right. That's only going to continue to improve.
Yeah, so we in the last 12 months, we've handled that situation, and we've gone from running like 24 to 48 sensors per gateway to running hundreds of sensors, like 300 you can run off of one gateway. And that significantly reduces the cost, reduces the cost to the grower to actually implement this technology. And it increases our profitability because we can implement the technology at a lower cost.
Yeah, fantastic. Jeffrey, thank you. I appreciate you taking the time to run through this today. Really fascinating. Anybody who's interested in learning more about BeeHero, you can visit www.beehero.io. You can learn more about Agency 29 at agency29.com. And on our blog, we also have a recent interview with BeeHero's CEO, Omer Davidi. And so if you're interested in learning even more about the trajectory of BeeHero, you can take a listen to that on the Spilled Salt podcast. Thanks, everyone. Have a wonderful day.
You.
Thanks, Jeffrey.
You're welcome.